welcome to the Bald Ambition podcast. I'm your bald host, Mookie Spitz. And the other bald guy today with tons of ambition is David Mondgock. He is the founder of Catalyst IQ. They are an AI-based company who is evolving the model of pharma marketing and communications. Is that a fair characterization of your startup and what you
It's
guys are trying to do?
yeah, I mean it's not a startup, it's a refocus in AI, but really we've been on the forefront of pharma in terms of using data to improve marketing and sales, but really taking it down to the levels of granularity where we understand the content and creative signals that are really driving engagement and facilitating value.
Great. Let's take a couple steps back. You and I have been in this racket for quite some time. And pretty much since inception of this digital health reality, we've been talking about personalization.
Yeah.
It's through the efficacy of biometrics. We've been talking quantified self. And now with the AI revolution, pretty much triggered by ChatGPT and the OpenAI folks, end of November 2022, it's been only 3 years, and it's astonishing what has happened. Utterly transformative, and yet beckoning for real benefit, real results. It seems like we're at the cusp of enormous excitement. Capital investment in the trillions, gigawatt data centers are sprouting like mushrooms. And for us in
Yeah.
healthcare, in digital health, in pharma marketing and engagement,
Yeah.
what's it looking like? It's confusing. We're getting mixed signals. How do
It
you bring
is.
clarity to this situation?
It is. And the irony of it all is that from a pharmaceutical manufacturer's perspective, who really changed the expectation of customers, believe it or not, is Amazon. Amazon was the game changer in terms of efficiency, in terms of preference, in terms of personalization, in terms of using data to make it easy to basically start to find products. Where we are now, it's interesting. If you take a look at the bend in the road, the bend in the road is that both patients and HCPs alike are wanting specific types of content that are clearly aligned to where they are in their customer journey. And pharma is still using a one size fits all. So it's been a square peg round hole for them for a while. Where we've been at the forefront was saying that the most important aspect of marketing and sales was relevant, meaningful content, not the bias that is basically internal and cherry picking KPIs to basically say that it is relevant, but really coming up with ways to create signals around that. And then understanding when influence is imparted. And then, most importantly, understanding when the facilitation of value has now ascended based upon that customer. Now, all this maps back into their strategy and everything else, but that's what's really exciting to me. So what we've been focused on is two things. Number one, creating using AI to basically create attributes from content that are able to give us those types of signals. We've been doing that for over 5 years in some of the major pharma houses. We have an automated system that's actually quite exciting, and the data that you get from that. So when I say signals, I mean a lot of the data. It transcends from just mere interaction and touch points to really starting to understand relevance and influence. Okay. The second thing is creating customer journeys. Pharma's been talking the jargon with customer journeys, but what's really interesting is that they're still operating in terms of tactics. If you talk to 5 pharma marketers and talk about campaigns, they'll say an email is a campaign. No, it isn't. It's a tactic, right? It's a component. So really putting them on the path of actually executing customer journeys with more of a predictive insight in terms of how they can actually drive from one sequence to the next. Then evolving them into a responsive journey, meaning automation. So most pharma companies have bought Salesforce Marketing Cloud, or if you bought Adobe, you have Marketo. Some of the smaller firms bought marketing automation systems, but that ability to actually provide a responsive trigger, or I call them tripwires, is another aspect of how we're able to capitalize on a behavior. And then lastly, what we've been heavily involved in is the integrated journey. And that is involving the sales force. So now it's the confluence of both sales and marketing towards a common objective. And it's the content and the engagement depth that basically then drives how that rep now is going to basically initiate with that customer.
Well, data is power and power is money.
Correct.
And the money has kept up the walled gardens of all of this information. So you've had historically companies like DRG that try to connect the dots between scripts, Salesforce activity,
Yeah.
segmentation on the professional side. And you have all sorts of companies who've been, doing the connection points between anonymized consumer information, channel engagement, translated into sales activity, right? So how do you climb over these walled gardens? How do you plug in all this data, and how do you do it, especially with what would be considered sensitive information as to physician behavior, script writing, patient behaviors?
Yeah.
How do you keep it safe? How do you keep it compliant? And at the same time, how do you get this comprehensive data, plug it in, and make it make sense for you in
Yeah.
terms of journey mapping, engagement modeling, and the like?
Yeah, it's a really, really large, broad question. So let's just start to break it down. The best way to do that is to basically create an internal capability that's able to structure that data, making meaningful. So first thing that we do is we create unified frameworks that are able to basically bring that data in-house so you could actually leverage it. And that's where AI is so fantastic, because you can automate a lot of this, right? So we can create all of the attributes we want. That gives us, like I said, gives us a sense of what those signals are based upon what our objectives are. But we want to bring that data in-house and we want to integrate it. Now, historically, Pharma's been obsessing with building these, huge iron warehouses, which we know have actually had a lot of value, but have always had quality issues because as they transcend markets, it's not unified. I'll give you a classic example, even something as simple as a taxonomy for the same piece of content could basically change as it goes across brands, as it goes across markets, and so on and so forth. So having the data hygiene and the validation rules in place, have always been one of the gaps that pharma has to actually produce. The thing that's interesting, that the second part of that, and where I think there's a huge opportunity, is pharma spends a lot of money with third-party partners: Medscape, Hippocrates, Doximity, Relevant Health, um, even the AMA, frankly. And the data they get back is, how do I put this in a kind way, minimal and contrived, right? It's, it almost seems manufactured, right? Here's guaranteed engagements that you're going to basically get, and it's basically a lot of impressions. And then they don't have any of the same attributes to actually have that level of harmony with the internal data. So third-party data has always been basically excluded with more of just an awareness context, which actually it's halo content. It has more than just an effect of just awareness. It has probably a lot of effect that you're just unaware of. So having that ability to actually get better data and doing that harmonization of the attributes that actually matter to give you those signals is the second part. I think that's absolutely needed and certainly an opportunity. And the last is enriching the algorithms. So every pharma company is using next best action, next best engagement. We believe actually in two new ones that we create, which is next best content. Again, that to us, enriching it with the attributes that we actually create, which gives us a sense of who that audience is and where they are in their customer journey, as well as the preferences to them, It allows us to basically better understand that customer state and how marketing would try to facilitate a behavior, enriching algorithms, and then taking it down to next best experience. And that is really where you get to the adaptive side. How do we start to create adaptive content that now is going to be infused by data that's going to then create the overall experience? That's where the Gen AI comes in, and that's where the content accelerators come in. Most pharma companies aren't close to that yet. But personally, where I'm going is I want to build an entire content OS, which basically starts from the ability to create modular content automatically and extract claims and automate MLR, create all of the semantic tagging that's going to give us the overall signals, and then almost be at an agentic framework where it's a creative advisory board and with a Gen AI front end that's able to actually create content, whether it's a derivative of existing content that's already pre-approved, or it could be a variation of that, or it could be new content that would basically help them save a lot in terms of agency cost.
Sounds like the holy grail or wish list for a pharma marketer. Let's bring it down to earth.
Yeah.
I am the brand manager for a drug that treats chocolitis, and I'm with Mucardis Pharmaceuticals, and the chocolitis treatment launched last year,
Mm-hmm.
and I've plugged into all of these vendors and partners that you mentioned. I've got a CRM program, I've got a multi-channel marketing campaign,
Yep.
I've got an advisory board, I've got the whole shebang, and I'm frustrated. I'm getting fire hoses of data and all sorts of promises. I've got this complicated dashboard of everything plugging in, and it's hard for me to make sense. It's hard for me to tie it back to my own KPIs. And I'm really, really having trouble connecting lift of my chocolitis solution out there to the various initiatives I'm making, many of which are fragmented, hard to measure, and I don't really understand the customer at the end of all this. So I give you a call. Say,
Yep.
Dave, you know, I want to
Yep.
treat chocolitis, but it's a mess.
Well,
What are you gonna do for me? How does all those goodies that you lay out,
yeah.
which is really part of any pharma marketer's ideal wish list, how do you make it real, and how does an engagement with you shake out?
Really good question. Our engagements basically enter in at various parts in in the journey themselves. So first of all, if you're looking for one-to-one attribution, meaning that customers had an interaction with you and you think that you're going to get script left, I think that you can start to understand that that's not possible and it's not realistic. The fact of the matter is if you take a look at attribution models, and I don't want to get into like a technical chat here, but it takes multiple points, and the more emotional or the more risky it is to choose a product, the more meaningful touch points they actually have. So break it down into phases. First of all, of your target customers, do you know where they are in their journey? Most likely no. Let's start there. The second thing is what is both the sentiment of the brand and the affinity of the brand based upon those targets. This gives us the ability to micro segment, and then gives us the ability to take a look at our messaging and think about how we can change our messaging and then start acting on that. So again, what we're doing is we're using content as the vehicle to try to be as meaningful and relevant as possible, and then trying to basically focus on that customer state. So we come in where we can evaluate where you are with the data you have and start to establish customer states, and then start to put together ideas for micro segmentation. Or more likely, let's tag all of your content with levels of granularity. Let's basically use those values to see where your customers are and then calculate a segment, which I like to do much more. I'll give you a classic example. Marketers need to know the highest potential value that they can provide against certain types of customers. It's not just target customers. It's not just key accounts, right? I'll give you a case example. If you use simple segmentation, let's say low engagers and high engagers, right? There is a higher potential value in terms of communicating to the low engagers and graduating them to be a high engager, because most likely those high engagers are the 20% that are writing 80% of your scripts. Okay. So simple segmentation that basically has clear actionability with the measurement capability to then really attribute the relevance that you're having through that campaign, and then mapping that customer state all the way through. Now, ultimately, what we've actually found, and our next topic should really be how AI is actually influencing both HCP and patients to basically find information. But what we're finding now is that relevant engagements are actually much easier now to attribute to script lift, because it's taking less engagements to basically achieve the objective. So where it was taking maybe 10 or 12 touch points in order to basically provide a level of influence, we're finding that you could actually start to reduce that journey down to 4 or 5 touch points if those touch points are relevant and if they are sequential.
All
So
right,
that's
so let's keep it concrete before we leap into the abstract again with that great segue idea of the value of AI for engagement overall. I've got a chocolitis awareness campaign.
yeah.
I've got your usual website, but we know how websites go, especially these days with the bots. I've got a TikTok influencer campaign that's going on, and then I've got a Facebook page which is fairly active, and I've got various paid campaigns that are running as well with all sorts of content. I'm approaching chocolitis from a fear base that if you don't address this issue, disaster could ensue. And it's also from an aspirational vantage point as far as content goes, where this is your ticket to ride for better health. So engaging with you, you're saying you analyze content. Do you also analyze channel engagement? Do you give me
Yeah.
advice about a media mix? What is the output of your AI driven analytics, which could help me with my chocolitis unbranded educational campaign that's across all these channels with that content?
Ultimately, it's a customer state. So breaking down your target customers in terms of where they are in their journey. Some are only in awareness. You may think it's only in awareness. If it's a brand new product, it's in awareness. But most products out there have been out there for a while. And the bigger opportunity is higher marketing effectiveness for existing products to basically increase upsell, cross sells. So if it's a new product, all right, it's awareness. It's basically taking a look more at overall channel effectiveness and content affinities. But for therapeutic areas like oncology, where you only have 20,000 oncologists in the country and so many companies are trying to reach them, that's where you're getting a customer state, where they are in their journey, what their overall affinities are, both in terms of channel, meaning preferences, but also in terms of content and creative. All of that gets packaged up into a recommendation with a likelihood or a propensity to engage. So that's the thing you're getting. You're getting much more of a prediction with a recipe to basically activate based upon one or two indicators, which are basically just channel, which is mainly volume, or had a rep visit, so now let's try to basically send them some Halo content. It's much more focusing on the state. The second thing is what are the global KPIs, the master KPIs that we want to really start tracking. So you got a chocolitis brand. What is the sentiment of that brand that's currently out there today, especially if it's an existing brand? And how do we basically try to change that sentiment? And then how do we map that into an affinity that basically says, okay, we've now established a brand affinity where we've increased our likelihood to actually write that script. And then how do we predict in terms of how many touch points and what type of content we need to create to drive up a propensity? This is actually taking the lesson from Bill Schmarzo. I'm not sure if you know who he is. Yeah, he's a really, really smart guy. I'm a fan, but he has an entity propensity model that he taught years ago, and it's one of the ones I learned, and I think it's really a fantastic model. I've used it over and over again. So that's where a lot of these things are calculating. Now, from a marketer standpoint, the data is being pre-calculated with the relevant context so that marketers can start to take action. The thing that marketers need to do, though, that's not answered from this is, well, what type of content should I be creating? Most of them are basically using outdated frameworks based upon the Salesforce, or worse yet, taking the CLM content and trying to retrofit that omni-channel, which is another drastic error. It's another reason why I want to build more of a Gen AI capability to actually accelerate content. The content creation capability to achieve some of the objectives and drive up those types of KPIs is another huge area that I think will excite marketers, but definitely challenge them in terms of how their jobs are going to change.
Terrific. So the concrete recommendations that I get from you, whether it's this unbranded, consumer-focused chocolitis awareness campaign, but it sounds like we're going to get greater efficacy with a more HCP focus, where you got a smaller N, and you're really pulling out some of those propensities. What kind
Yeah.
of pragmatic recommendations can you give me for my HCP engagement, or for specifically the kind of content I'm sharing to maximize engagement and behavioral change?
Yeah. I mean, I tell you a quick win right now, or is most of your HCPs would love to engage with more scientific information from pharma. Pharma is sitting on, they have the best evidence in the world. They have some of the best science in the world. And the ability for HCPs to get access to it is unfortunately hindered quite a bit. Now, this is a good segue into how AI now is helping to drive product discovery. Because what's happening now is, and this is where you and I are working together, is the AI assisted HCP or AI assisted patient. So what's happening now is now we have the ability to enter in very robust context specifics around the type of information requests we have beyond Google. Google was mainly keyword based or maybe key phrase based. Now it's full context of a prompt. And the second thing is it's machines that are curating content for us. Now this opens up an opportunity to basically create relevance. Use companies like Open Evidence. Have you heard of them?
No, I have not.
Fantastic company. Huge fan of this company. What they've done is they basically are the HCP curation of content to do exactly what I'm talking about. But what HCPs are doing right now is they're having the ability to make their time much more efficient at the point of care by entering in much more robust information, and the machine will go out and curate that content for them so that they can really satisfy, again, relevance, the information request at much greater levels. Now, this is fantastic for pharma because now they should be focused on content creation that would be consumed by these bots to basically satisfy these independent use cases. Another area that we've been focused is really starting to understand what those prompts are, what sites are actually rendering. We found that the structure of the content that pharma creates is very image heavy, which is not great for getting the information absorbed. And a lot of the validation and verification that these bots crave is inaccessible. So
Yeah,
there's
let
huge.
me let me let me put a pin in it for a second to give
Yeah.
context to your benefit, which I think is terrific. We are shifting models now. The old Google model is you had spiders that were
Yeah.
out there combing the web, and basically building authority around particular websites that got a lot of traffic.
Right.
The Google algorithm, Larry and Sergey had figured it out, and they blew the doors off Ask Jeeves and Alta Vista because their results pages were based on ranking that was also related to network modeling and network math. They had figured this out. So the spiders are going out. They're checking for content, but they're also checking for the interconnectedness of websites, building authority, that kind of stuff. We're now shifting into an AI bot model. The bots are similarly going out there, but they're spidering up whole chunks of content and chopping it up into tokens. And if I'm hearing you properly, you are providing expert guidance for pharma and healthcare companies to make their content available online in a way that is most conducive for these new AI bots to find it, scrape it, tokenize it, and prioritize it in searches that patients and professionals are making. Is that a
Absolutely.
good way of looking at it?
Yeah.
You are, in a sense, the SEO, where we did search engine optimization so that the bots can find you. You are now, in a sense, you are
It's AI.
AI optimization,
Right. Right.
where
Right.
it's the same kind of principle, which is here's my content, it's online,
Yeah.
find me, scrape me, chop me into tokens, and then reassemble me for prompts for
Yeah.
my target audience that can get my content to the right user in the right way through ChatGPT, through Claude, through Grok, through all of them.
Yeah, and what we do, especially for launch brands, is we take a look at it not only from a competitive standpoint, but really try to give them a sense of where those content gaps are against individuals.
Okay, did I
Because
get it right though? So in a
you
sense,
did,
this is what
you
you're
did.
doing.
I mean, yeah, it's the exact same thing we're doing with the data currently right now when we basically mesh that together. It's basically realizing that the value of content to influence is greater than it's ever been, and personalization is happening whether we want it or not because of these AI bots. That said, what's the opportunity for pharma? It's to make sure that their content's accessible, it's easily curated, and that they have a sense of how to meet the customers, at the place that they are in their journey, and
This
that's
is
what
this is
documents are.
big. This is huge. If I can put a pin
Oh,
in that too. So
yeah,
going back to the traditional Google focused model,
yeah,
you have a patient at a certain milestone in their journey, and you have the healthcare professional situated to help them at that touch point. Okay,
yeah,
so that's where they're at. Now, in the Google model, you can go in there and then you can have a bit of long tail searching, but the whole attitude is different for Google or Bing than it is for ChatGPT or Claude. Where with the chatbot, you're actually going into the detail of what you're trying to find. And the whole definition of what we used to call long tail
yeah,
is almost absurd in comparison to the capability that's now available to everyone through these bots to
yeah.
get into the nitty gritty of what's on their mind, what they're needing, down to the minutia of every little nuance of their expectation. And these bots are terrific at taking these prompts, however quirky and detailed, and then cobbling together probabilistically content that's most relevant for them. And you're a facilitator to ensure that a prompt, no matter how quirky and complex and nuanced, translates to a bot result that translates ultimately the value proposition and benefit of the healthcare company for the patient, for the HCP at that point in their journey. Is
It's
that
going
is
to
that
be,
accurate?
yeah, yeah. I mean, where it gets really exciting, Mike, is when you start thinking about the patient health journeys. Let's talk about because you're going to basically see people take much more control of their wellness, of their healthcare, and it's going to be actually promoted as well. Most of the noise we get out there is about hallucinations and other types of things, but um,
I'm frankly, I'm kind of tired of that. I
we do.
get it.
Yeah,
It's like that Louis C.K. joke where he's on an airplane and he sees somebody. This is in the early days of being able to call from a flight, and he
yeah,
sees someone on a phone at 30,000 feet, flying at 600 miles an hour, and the guy loses his connection, slams the phone against the headrest, and goes
yeah,
into a fit.
yeah,
And the comic is like, come on, guy,
yeah.
your call just went out into space.
Right.
And everyone is kvetching now over like hallucinations and inaccuracies. Step back for a second as to how
It's
absolutely mind blowing even the remedial capabilities of GPT-3 were.
yeah,
How 5 might have been an air quote disappointment,
yeah,
but we've leaped this quantum level in engagement and technology. We take it for granted, and now we're complaining that it's not 100% accurate 100% of the time. I
yeah.
just find that kind of ironic, which is the world has changed, and now we've got light speed travel, and you're complaining that the peanuts are spoiled.
I completely agree. And that's probably another podcast where we could talk about how Asia views AI versus how we actually view AI.
Yeah,
Completely different. And
right.
and in China and India, they're moving at a much faster pace than we are because of the fear of change. But
Yeah,
let's get
yeah.
back to patient health
And they
journey.
complain less. There's like, this is working, and we're gonna tinker with the model too. Like, just to go on a tangent, DeepSeek shook everything up in
Right.
January by basically doing a whole lot more with less. And they were able to do so because they took nothing for granted, and they're embracing the technology and the change without these endless caveats that it's going to destroy the world, kill all humanity, take all of our jobs, or
Crazy.
hallucinate
Yeah.
your egg salad recipe. The horror.
Yeah, there's a little too much emotion in this, and too few facts actually driving this. But the patient health journeys, and this is something that matters to me personally, as somebody who started med school and quit, as somebody who was going to basically be a pharmacologist at one point. Um, I care about fixing our health system actually quite a bit, and I care in fixing the reputation of most pharma manufacturers to actually educate patients to really understand the value of these products and making their lives better and saving their lives, because it really does. But there is good data out there right now which gives us indication in terms of where patients are in their health journeys. It's unbelievable how granular it can actually be. We can take a look at visits they had, and doctor's visits, and pharmacy visits. And pharma spent a lot of money on putting together these overall models, but they've never mapped it back to campaigns and how marketing could actually start to meet people. And that's another thing that we can start to do, is by understanding now the patient's health journeys and basically having the ability to understand how we're able to reach them much more effectively. And for people who think that you can't do that with patients, you can. Just look at products like LiveRamp, and look at products like Komodo, that are two wonderful companies who basically are able to do that. But again, it's the content creation, it's the messaging, it's understanding all of the nuances upon which they are engaging with you, the context around engagement, that allows us to basically increase the effectiveness and pinpoint and highly target that engagement. And that's, you can only do that through AI. And these AI curators, these AI bots, right, are doing nothing but curating it based upon all of this criteria that is not transparent to us. If you look at GPT-5 on OpenAI, and if you're writing like me, I write 3-page prompts with loads of context, the level of accuracy and is actually quite astounding. And the ability to basically make that engagement that much more relevant where I have less touch points is such an untapped opportunity that pharma marketers who jump on top of that are going to have a unique first mover advantage.
Yeah, it's kind of like seeing into another dimension. So if you're living on a two-dimensional plane, all you see are
Right.
lines. And I kind of get the feeling that as marketers, that's the world we've been in. Limited visibility, one-dimensional, two-dimensional kind of planning, right? And when you add the dimension of AI overtly in this kind of way, it's coming at it from both sides, which I think is a key point you're making. The
Yeah.
prompts the prompts are much more sophisticated and revealing on the part of the user, and then the aggregated cobbled together results, the predictive models that are then applied to provide
Yeah.
solutions are increasingly more sophisticated and despite the anti-hype, increasingly more accurate and revealing. So it's a perfect storm of the user adding more information, more relevant information, the system being able to input it, analyze it, and provide outputs that are increasingly personalized and nuanced.
Yeah.
And that's exponentially increasing right now.
Yeah. I mean, the irony is if you're a pharma marketer today, right, you've been boxed into a very, very low ceiling of Salesforce equivalency, right? You know, I can't tell you how many times I've been in meetings and they're like, how many equals one rep engagement, right? They're always looking at that overall equivalency. This is changing that entirely and basically saying that customers are not a one size fits all. Their needs are not the same. Um, we need to try to find ways to anticipate what their needs actually are and then use the data we have and use the automation we have to curate as much context as we possibly can to basically try to predict that that engagement to actually achieve a higher output. And then we want to map that up so that we can basically change that customer state and market it. I believe that if marketers could focus 100% on customer state and manage that state, then they could actually do things eventually in terms of forecasting. Um,
How
and
are marketers going to maintain control? And by that I mean in the traditional model, the paid, owned, earned situation, it's seen as a one-to-one correspondence, which is I go through the laborious process of strategizing, creating, approving, and then distributing content. I throw it out there, and then based on crude metrics, I measure it in isolation, and then I cobble together these turgid reports to try to figure out what's going on here. The new
yeah,
model is incredibly powerful. It's multivariate, it's multidimensional as we're describing. But I
yeah,
feel like as a marketer that a certain measure of control is also being lost. The bots
no,
are becoming increasingly powerful and they're doing what they want in a sense with the content that's going on out there. So how do we hang on
yeah,
to our content and how can we ensure that the behavioral change that we're intending to induce for the public health benefit, which is our mission, of course,
yeah.
is actually happening.
So a couple things. First of all, marketers are not in control today. The customer's in control, right? And where marketing has been challenged and has been struggling, frankly, is the ability to basically shape that customer. Is to actually implement control, shape and steer that customer journey, which is what I'm actually speaking about now. So I think we're actually putting more control back into the marketer. I don't think AI is at the point. Here's where I do agree. Ethically, AI needs human in the loop. I believe in human in the loop for oversight. And I believe that if marketers could actually leverage their expertise and be much more strategic and have the ability to have the data at their fingertips with real recommendations and KPIs that are all focused on clarity of objective, it gives them much more control. So I actually think that we're empowering marketers. We're also empowering higher utilization of all of their previous investments in MarTech that most companies are using at a fraction of their potential. And then lastly, we're actually helping the companies deepen the customer relationship, where frankly, I think it's more of a top of mind awareness aspect. This is actually facilitating and creating a relationship. That's why I push sentiment so hard. If you take a look at companies like Tesla, um, Tesla has done both a good and bad job in terms of actually creating sentiment. They did a fantastic job early on, and sentiment really drove sales of that brand. And then Elon had a political ambition, and then he eroded that sentiment. And you see exactly what happens when you take your eye off sentiment. Well, here it's the exact same thing, only there's much more sensitivity and empathy that can be easily imparted. And I think it only is able to benefit pharma and needs to be driven from an authentic human aspect. Humans are genuine. A machine, as much as I love AI, can only take a derivative. It can only copy, right? We still need people with humanistic tendencies creating genuine, authentic um, content, and we need the automation to basically help us to facilitate it so we can target it correctly and make sure it's meeting that patient's needs. There's pure ethics around this as opposed to just script.
Yeah, yeah. Well, AI has been built in for quite some time. I mean, the programmatic model of ad bidding and buying has been, in a sense, AI driven. So AI is nothing new in marketing and digital marketing, nothing new really in healthcare marketing, but it's a quantum leap right now where it's not just in the AdWords, but it's in the content itself, and it's also most critically in how our customers think about engaging with our content. So it's evolving in that direction. And
Yep.
that's a good segue to talk about this evolution from what we could consider the SEO of AI into the analogy of SEM of AI. So right now, about 3% of users go to bots immediately.
Mhm.
ChatGPT alone has about 700 million, 800 million weekly. Once a week, on average, 800 million people go to ChatGPT to find information. Now, that's a
Yeah.
big number. It's still a relatively small proportion of overall digital searching, but that number is growing every day, every hour. There's no model currently that exists for monetizing this engagement from the consumer point of view, aside from the usual data mining, and the investment capital is pouring in, but the profitability remains negligible compared to the investment. That's why people are talking about bubble. They're talking about a cat eating its own tail with NVIDIA lending chips to OpenAI, and then OpenAI using NVIDIA's chips, and that model is being repeated with AMD, now with Broadcom. So the industry itself is kind of incestuous, it's investment heavy, and it has yet to create what would be the equivalent of an AdWords kind of model in AI. But we can sense that it's coming, right? And what I'm trying to get at here is we eventually will reach the point where instead of putting up a website and encouraging your content to get scraped and prioritized and reconfigured by the bots, we're going to be pumping our data right into the bots and then paying for token prioritization. I see that as inevitable in one form or another. ChatGPT just announced the other day that cooperation with Walmart, you can access Walmart from ChatGPT.
Right.
You could shop around for your new house on Zillow through ChatGPT. And we all know the day is coming in one form or another. Well, ChatGPT and their kind will start prioritizing responses based on paid models for token prioritization. I think that that's inevitable.
Yeah.
We're
I think
not there yet, though. So, can you share some of your thoughts about us living in this cusp, this never land between optimizing content so it gets used by patients and physicians at the exact right point in their journey,
yeah.
and this undiscovered yet inevitable country with all of its inherent contradictions and possibilities for
Yeah.
the medium to longer term future?
I mean, boy, how do I do this and not sound like a geek? What is happening now, and there will be new companies to come out there, is that um, there will be custom LLMs essentially that are going to be created that are able to basically do levels of refinement and control that will ping against ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude, but not use them solely because of a lot of what you actually said. And that's happening if you look at the legal industry. Actually, it's happening right now, even in healthcare offices. So there's new AI applications. There's one I just saw, and I apologize if the name escapes me, but where as the doctor is actually working with a patient, it's capturing all of the notes. It's basically able to redact everything. It creates a follow up email. It creates the medication order. It basically handles that with the goal of the allowing a physician to spend more time with the patient. I think
That's
this is
gold, by the way. The point of
oh,
care experience sucks. It's
oh, it sucks.
basically
I agree with you.
physicians are computer operators. They're
Yeah.
typists,
Not
right?
only
That's
that,
got to go. That's got
yeah,
to
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Yeah,
So great stuff is happening there. But all
yeah,
of that is run through a very custom LLM. What we do as well is a custom
right.
LLM. When we tag content, we're not going to basically ping it externally, right? We want to basically take a look at, healthcare professionals of X specialty and so on and so forth. You want to get a refined set of data. So that's where I think that things are going. And I think that's where that there's going to basically be a new type of fee structure. But um, OpenAI's business model is definitely questionable and it's definitely overvalued. In fact, a lot of these general AI engines are really overvalued, but it's nothing new from when the internet came to be and e-commerce came to be.
Especially
Um,
early on.
it's
Right,
very early on, right?
right.
Now let's go back to your analogy around ads and like programmatic ad placement. I'm actually amazed to this day how little that industry has actually evolved. And I'm always amazed at how ineffective they truly are and how truly and how little that they actually measure. They have great platitudes and hype in terms of their sales process, but very little in terms of actually proving it. Um, my personal feeling, and I'm going to go back to a company like Open Evidence, if I was advising them, is I think companies have the ability to take the Gen AI, the content creation capability, and factor that into instead of having an ad that stands out, content is created where it actually weaves in key messages and other value propositions that's really in line with what content has been curated against that prompt.
Yeah,
I think
1000%. Banner ads have been bullshit for a long
well
time.
put,
Yeah,
well
right.
put,
Yeah,
right? And even worse, those expandable ads and those interactive ads.
yeah,
Look,
yeah. That's like Yahoo.com
yeah,
1998. And to your point, we haven't really gotten too much further from
yeah.
that.
I think it's great for impulse buys. Instagram and TikTok are great, right? I've actually proven that impulse buys, but
Yeah.
people who are who are looking to find information around symptom management and patient handling programs, I mean, this isn't going to cut it. And HCPs who are basically looking for products who are literally looking at an EHR and have to make decisions, don't need ads plastered. It's just it's
It's
waste.
it's
It's a very
insane. We're gonna look back at these user experiences and just shake our heads as
Yeah,
pebbles and bam bam ad hoc cobbled together
yeah,
solutions just to drive revenue.
yeah.
That very very minimal user impact, and in a sense, they just get in the way.
Yeah. So if we can find really good content, well, first of all, if we can find stronger awareness in terms of content creation that needs to take place based upon what people are actually looking for, again, anticipating unmet needs, making that much more acute instead of being completely opaque today. I think that that's absolutely achievable. Then it's actually creating your own custom LLM. It's
Yeah,
your
I
own
like that a
name.
lot. And
Yeah.
I want to put a pin in that too. And this was in a sense brought to life by DeepSeek, as I mentioned before,
Oh
where
yeah.
as a consequence of that, you can have your own LLM on a laptop.
You can.
That was unprecedented before that, and that's going to set a new standard of these walled LLM gardens, if you will, with specialized approaches, with targeted audiences, with some of the full firepower of these larger models, sitting on a laptop, running an organization. You could
Yeah.
have several of these running different parts of an organization depending on your needs. And then you can have one LLM for an organization that then gets parsed out with different projects and different forms of focus.
Yeah.
So this fragmentation of the model gets us away from centralized authority, which in a sense democratizes AI,
Hmm.
but it also further fragments it in a way that might make it difficult for a company to operate at scale.
And that's where agentic AI comes in, right?
Yeah.
That's what agents do. And everyone's afraid of agents, but that's where agents are basically able to use semi-structured data to basically then perform an activity or a task automatically and actually have them do multiple things. Um,
Yeah, and another
I'm-
great point, because
yeah.
we not only are LLMs fragmenting, to your point,
Mhm.
but it's not about a single prompt and then another prompt and then another prompt and then leaning on the user to go down the rabbit hole. It's a high level macro request within which is implicitly embedded a whole host of subtasks, which are just understood to be a part of that top line query, and then off to the races. Nobody cares. Nobody cares how you do it. Nobody cares where you went. People just want things done, whether it's give me information, whether it's performing a task, whether it's booking a hotel room or a concert, or whether it's trying to find the solution to my chocolitis.
Yeah, but in pharma, you really have to have a governance board with some of this stuff because
That's the
you have,
next thing that I wanted to segue
yeah,
into.
yeah,
There's two
yeah,
issues that we've been glossing over in a sense, where
yes,
both of us obviously know they're central. And the one is data privacy, personal health information,
yeah.
and the other one is compliance and accountability. Everything from adverse event reporting to the usual laundry list of yellow and red flags that terrifies medical, legal, and regulatory experts in pharma, right? And in all healthcare companies.
Well, I mean, we've actually automated probably about 80% of MLR right now, so we can focus them a little bit better.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, uh, a lot of what they do every day and why things take so long is that they go through this very robust checklist. It's very laborious, but it's not hard to basically create a capability and say to start doing that. We've had that capability built for well over a year. I believe Viva is putting it into their next implementation that they're talking about AI availability by the end of the year as well. So I think that that's a good thing to basically try to speed the approval and have the ability to do frequent checkpoints. Um, so I think that that's achievable. But once we start getting into the agentic where there's privacy and security concerns, this is where we need human oversight and governance around this. We definitely need ethical responsibility that needs to take place because it can get out of. Here's where I think that it's not overhyped; it's probably underestimated. The amount of damage that it can do by basically having the data available, it's that powerful, needs to be governed tightly. So some companies like Merck, for example, I actually know someone over there who's fantastic. He started a capability, a governance board. He's an absolute brilliant guy. He's got great ideas. That's definitely needed, and I actually support that 100%. The stuff that we're talking right now, again, is really around the ability to try to predict an engagement and really try to change behavior. You can see in terms of a lot of the misinformation, even with HHS, where, around vaccines and things like that, where it can get really out of control. A lot of that is AI driven. You can basically
Sure.
see
I mean, a
person's
predictive
emotions.
model is predicting based
It's
on what
it's
people
that
are
scary.
saying. It
Yeah,
doesn't know, it doesn't know, and it doesn't differentiate. The scientific community is often arguing about key topics,
yeah.
and there isn't necessarily consensus. So
So
it's problematic. Our very definition of truth is called into question.
yeah,
And just as a side note, too, remember Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, privacy violations. What are you opting into and opting out of? On the back end too, there's some challenges of what these bot companies are doing with that data, their access to our personal health information. There's
mhm,
problems now even with these app plugins. Like, is Walmart going to be privy to my love affair with Chat GPT and the intricate details of my fantasy romantic life? Not that I use Chat GPT as my significant other, but I'm just illustrating that people are using ChatGPT for true confessions. They're pouring their hearts out to the bot, if only because the bot listens and is responsive. And where's that information going? And then when more and more apps plug into the bots, I'm releasing more and more of my personal predilections and personal information, financial, psychological. And when we're dealing with health and wellness,
that's right.
that's exacerbated 10, 100 fold.
Yeah,
And when for you to be able to do what you're doing in terms of attribution modeling, know where patients are on their journey, knowing how HCPs can help them, you're obviously tapping into information, albeit in aggregate, that is personal, that is health and wellness related. And to your point, we need a ghost in the machine who can make sure that this doesn't get out of hand.
yeah. I mean, this is why I don't think it's going to take anyone's jobs because I think you need human in the loop. I don't believe in autonomous AI. I believe, in Gen AI to basically create based upon infused data. And I definitely believe in agents to actually perform activities and tasks using that data to basically augment and amplify teams. But I do not believe in autonomous AI, where key decisions are made by the system.
Well, that's it's a mixture of necessity and stupidity coming together, right? Certain
Um,
functions are already autonomous, and the question becomes how do you delineate what is and isn't autonomous, right? And that's tricky sometimes. Sometimes, the science fiction trope is that the most remedial aspect of AI empowerment leads to our doom. Like, we give the AIs permission to clean our toilets, and
yeah,
all of a sudden they're using plumbing as an access point to our nuclear reactors and our power stations, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. It
right?
can it can get scary very, very quickly, right? I
Yeah, it can
mean,
get
there's lots
scary
of
and in
scenarios.
unexpected ways. That's the
Yeah.
thing. So we got to
But
plug them into stuff for the sake of convenience, but we can't plug them into everything. And then where do you draw the line between safety and utility? And that's been the issue throughout this evolution, not only of digital health, but digital technology in general. What your mom used to tell you, never ever get into a car with a stranger, stay
right,
at someone's house you don't know,
right,
and share your personal information online. And now we've got Uber, Airbnb,
right.
and I bet you just paid most of your bills, right? Automatically. And when was the last time you wrote a check?
Never. You don't have
so
to.
so there you go. I mean,
Never. In fact, I
and then
don't even
you have
trust you.
actual cash in your wallet.
Yeah, it's not needed, right? Right.
Yeah, yeah,
I look at this as all wonderful, innovation. Um, the reason why I call attention to AI though is AI has the ability to make a decision, and it will make a decision if you let it. And there needs to basically have a humanistic aspect over that. That's the ethical concern I have. I do
yeah,
not believe that it is at the ability as fast as evolving and as slow as we are in terms of learning about it and actually adopting it. Um, I believe that we still need to be in control because of our ethical sensibilities, and especially when it comes into healthcare and pharma, where you're right, there's lots of private information, lots of sensitive information. That's incredibly risky.
yeah,
But where I see pharma is lots of upside that they can start to be more relevant. They can start to cultivate a relationship with not only HCPs but also patients. They can start to understand how to get their content actually consumed, and it's really valuable, verifiable, validated content that needs to get into the hands of patients. I see tremendous amounts of upside, and I see the ability to actually start to create content that where there's gaps now without having to go to an agency for everything, and basically meet a demand that is only increasing at a much lowered cost.
yeah. And I think that's a great way to cap it, which is the opportunities are epic, and the opportunities are already available for pharma marketers to dive in swimming. I'm going to put a link to Catalyst IQ in the description here.
Thank
And
you.
I want to thank you, David
My
Mondgock,
pleasure.
for joining me on this AI healthcare journey. And let's see where this journey takes us, and where, most significantly, to your point, we insist on taking the journey. So
Yep.
human control, the man behind the curtain has to keep waving his arms around and moving those levers, because at the end of the day, we're all about public health. And whether it's robotic or agentic, LLM, or eventually AGI,
Yep.
which I think is going to take a little bit longer than most people are hinting. We
Yep. I
keep
would
moving
agree.
the goalposts and redefining what we even mean by AGI. But I think the times ahead are excited. I know you're as Pollyanna as I am, although with the caveats of being cautious, especially when we're dealing with the lives of patients suffering from conditions and really just seeking to renormalize the lives that they have had to leave behind because of their diseases. So I think
Yeah.
it's a noble quest.
Outstanding. Yeah.
Thanks so much. I
Thank
really
you so
appreciate
much.
your time.
I
And
appreciate it.
hit the link to contact David. And I'd like to bring you on in another 6 months or a year, and we'll see where things are going.
Yeah. Happy to do it.
Take care.
All right, Mike. Thank you.